In this video, part 4 of the 10-part series, we're going to talk about greywater. We're going to describe the system we set up in our home and why we think greywater is really important.
One of the experiments that I took on our property was the installation of a greywater system, which I should say is no longer there. After traveling through Jordan and Australia and parts of the United States where all of the places had legalized greywater systems, I came home and I just decided that this was the right thing to do. So greywater is basically the wastewater that comes from our sinks, our showers, our washing machines, and our bathtubs. And it's slightly dirty water, but it's mostly clean. It's not black water. Black water is what comes out of our toilets. And a lot of these places that we visited were using greywater to irrigate their landscapes on the outside. And there's very, very simple and logical ways to go about doing this that eliminate all of the risk associated with any of the contamination in that water after you bathe with it. So we put a greywater system into our house, and you can see in the photo here that we've got a three-way valve. So in the summertime, we could turn the three-way valve on and it would send the water out to landscape. And in the wintertime, we could shut the three-way valve off and it would send it back to sewer. So we had this ability to adjust the system based on the season. So in a cold season, it's not going to the landscape, and in the warm season, it is. And the water ran out of the house and it went through a biofilter that I created, which was built out of gravel and mulch. And so any particulate in this water would get filtered through this mulch, which grew all sorts of microbiology that would clean the water. And then from there, it would get sent out to the landscape. We ended up getting in trouble for putting our greywater system in because it's actually not legal within Alberta. And so we've now removed it. And so we need to actually engage our politicians and engage our policymakers in order to explain to them the importance of this. Alberta's in an interesting situation because 80% of the population lives south of Edmonton and 80% of the water is actually north of Edmonton. And we are coming up against hard constraints with regards to water within this province. We've got water demands for the oil and gas industry. We've got water demands within these cities, and the cities consume an enormous amount of water. We've got water demands with agriculture, and we're all pulling on the same limited resource, specifically, just a couple of rivers in southern Alberta that can't sustain activity in the way that we're currently living. And so one of the ways that we can dramatically reduce our landscape water requirements is, one, to design the landscape right in the first place, and number two, to actually harvest the relatively clean water that we produce on a daily basis and use it within the landscape where water is actually required. One of the great things about this is that if you get it right, we can end up recharging aquifers. We recharge our own landscape with water. And one of the most amazing things about greywater is that it connects the people in the house to the landscape. What do I mean by that? Basically, one of the first questions that I get when somebody says, what about all the toxic soaps? And how do you deal with that? And I say, well, what about them? Does it really matter that we're sending toxic soaps to the Bow River or if we're sending toxic soaps to our own landscape? The difference here is that, one, we can send the problem away and ask somebody else to deal with that problem. And number two, we're creating these tight feedback loops on our own property. And people are a lot more reluctant to put toxic chemicals onto their own property. So the first thing that happens when people start adopting greywater is their health improves because they're not putting all these toxic things on their body all of a sudden. Now they have to buy body products and cleaning products that are what we would refer to as biocompatible, which means that they're actually plant nutrients. So now instead of just buying soap, we're buying soap and fertilizer at the same time, and our landscapes actually grow better when we're running them on greywater. So a great resource for you on greywater, if you're interested in learning more about it, is Art Ludwig's Create an Oasis with Greywater. It's a fantastic book. It's probably one of the best books written on greywater itself.